Hi, and welcome to my deep dive on discernment. I thought it was really important to unpack this deeper. I I'm going to do it letter by letter. I'm starting with D because I observed and continue to observe that across all of my clients that I work with, as diverse as their situations are, a lot of what is at the source of the challenge, the biggest challenge, is discernment. It is so easy for us to say yes because we're asked to do something. And often, maybe, especially if it comes from some level of authority or seniority. And then there's this idea that even if we question it, that it feels like there's a discomfort in the challenging of whether or not it makes sense to bring what might be a brilliant idea forward. So I do think in many ways that having discernment as a genius that we're all developing on, even those of us that have D, to learn how to be really deliberate about it and invite it more and be contagious of it. And for those that have that as a working frustration, to begin to understand how they can grow and become in tune to their D within. So that's the intent right now, is to unpack it a little bit and then give some strategies and even some challenges for developing more D. And so I think what's important to start with is that this is, one of the most is the most misunderstood letter, if you will, because all of us believe we have discernment, and discernment we sometimes correlate with, expertise, and that is not. In fact, discernment is something that comes from within, from your instincts, your intuition, and is informed potentially by data, but not directed by it. And that is a really big distinction that we need to understand it and remove the intellect out of discernment. Discernment is very much in your gut. So, with level settling that, if we look at somebody that has genius in discernment, they innately notice things. They notice patterns. They notice any kind of outliers. And they're very connected and trust their feelings, their senses. And overall, they really don't need to know a lot of information about something to be able to have a sense of what is needed in the moment. On contrary, when discernment is a working frustration, it can be that sometimes you discount your feelings. Like you're comfortable more with facts, data, intellect. That's far more influential to your point of view than, say, your feelings are. If you're even in touch with your feelings, we live in a world that's very data driven, and it's not innate for everybody within the way we live to be connected to that. In fact, we're often taught how to disconnect from our feelings. And so looking at that, there's also a need for clarity, for data. And one of the most frustrating things you can say to, somebody with D as a frustration is, what is your gut telling you is needed right now? And vice versa, for somebody with that as a genius, if you say to them, show me the data, you might be triggering something there. So it's really important to notice that there's no connection here between how smart one is, if they have discernment or not. It's more about being connected to what's going on within, and to all of the intuition and instincts, which in and of itself requires us to distinguish it. In fact, a lot of folks with discernment as a genius might not always be able to tell the difference between what might be sourced from fear or anxiety and what might be sourced from true instincts and intuition. So if we pause and look at that, and we look at what's fear or anxiety provoked, it tends to be within the flight, freeze, fight, fawn type reaction, which is reactive. And when you find yourself reactive, that's not your instincts and intuition. That means there's some fear going on there, and it's time to pause and sit with that and understand a little bit more about what your feelings and needs are underneath that initial reaction. Versus your instincts and your intuition, they bring a source of aliveness within, It's very different than fear. It's coming from that gut feel of there's almost a calm to it, and a way of feeling at ease with what it is that's coming to you and coming alive in you. So those things are really important to understand and distinguish the difference, whether it's your working frustration or your genius. It is important to start to learn to distinguish between these two states that are occurring within us somatically. For those of you that have done some of the conscious leadership work with me, this is a lot of discernment is actually sourced from commitment number 3, feeling your feelings. So developing D is developing your sensory and understanding of feelings, which also requires to develop the skill between distinguishing between feelings and thoughts. You ever notice that when you ask somebody how they feel, they usually are telling you what they think. And so being able to distinguish between those things is vital. We have such a low vocabulary for feelings, and that's a place to start too, is to become really in touch with all of the range of feelings that we experience, and in so doing also discovering that feelings are information. They're data, they're not directives. You are not your feeling. I am not anxious, I am feeling anxious. The importance to understand and relate to your feelings is a big part about developing your D. So with this all in mind, and I've thrown a lot there for you on this, I'm going to suggest a couple of things. Number one, if you haven't read that chapter on commitment number 3 for feelings, I invite you to do that. Marshall Rosenberg's work on nonviolent communication, learning to really identify what you're observing, feeling, needing. These are the things that are going to really help you develop your discernment as well as you begin to develop those skills. So some fun things you can do just to develop a team is, if you're in a meeting and there's an unknown of what you should do, have everybody write down on a piece of paper what their instincts and intuition are telling them, have it then put it in and then read them out and discover how much they're either similar or different. But this is a way to invite instincts and intuition without it having to be built on what someone else said or what someone else said. But it's a great exercise to really discover what's alive in the room beyond what's being said. So that's one thing. And then there are a lot of somatic exercises too. I'm going to end up pulling together a workshop on each letter. So I'll go into more activities then. But in the meantime, I do have a lot of resources on any of these topics if you're interested in going deeper. Looking forward to unpacking all of the other letters. As I said, we'll start with this one. It really is such a critical skill needed to ensure that we don't end up doing a lot of work that isn't even what is needed. So with that, thank you very much. And I will look forward to connecting with you on the next letter.